This is Dan Schneider on this Dan Schneider video interview, another of my Actors on Acting series. Marianne Muellerleile is my guest, and the conversation will begin in a moment. Marianne Muellerleile is my guest. It's Actors on Acting. And as I like to usually do, I want to give the guest a few minutes to talk a little bit about their background, how they got into acting, did they come from an artistic family, etc. So welcome, Marianne. If you could give a little bit of biographical background about yourself.
All right. Hello, Dan. I'm the fourth of 5 children, born to a very loving couple in St. Louis, Missouri, Cecil and Margaret Muellerleile. My mother would be 105 today. So she graduated from high school, I think it was 1928. After that, she went to an acting academy in St. Louis. Because that was her passion, and she did graduate and went on to do children's theater and a radio show, and she had a column in the newspaper and always had a great love for theater. My father was an oil company executive, and although no formal acting training, he was a great public speaker and called upon a lot in various organizations, civic and fraternal organizations to speak. So I think the combination, I got my mother's Irish talent, and I got my father's German order and discipline.
Well, you've led a varied career, both in film, television, also daytime television, as well as theater. I would assume that you started in theater, though, in high school or college?
Yeah, I mean, even grade school.
Yeah.
But I mean, that is just fun. I never intended even in college to be an actor. But yeah, I did, everything you could do in grade school, whether it was getting up and debating or, the musical review or just anything really. And then high school also. I went to a small Catholic girls' school. There were 43 girls in our class. So you had a lot of opportunity. All the girls did, to get up and perform and do things, and I did. And then we were partnered with a Catholic boys' school, and so we were the girls for their plays and musicals, and I worked at a Catholic, performed at a Catholic boys' school and other shows.
Did you prefer drama or comedy when you're on stage? Are you better at one than the other?
I don't think I'm necessarily better at one. I think I'm strong in both, but I personally love comedy because I love to laugh, and I value the gift of laughter in life, and I like to make people laugh, and I like to laugh.
I'm sorry.
Like that.
Do you think that it's more difficult to make someone laugh than to cry, as the old saying goes?
They involve so many such different techniques. I will say this. I do think people can develop a sense of humor. I know that for a fact. But can a performer develop timing? I don't know. I don't know if you're born with it. It's probably nurtured. I know that from my own background. Put it this way. There are plenty of actors who can do drama, and not as many actors can do comedy.
Is being on stage for you sort of the ultimate kick for an actor, in that you're getting immediate feedback that, on a Tuesday you can tell the audience was with you, on a Wednesday you can tell that they're pretty bored? Is that the kind of immediate feedback that an actor appreciates more than just, say, filming 5 minutes of a movie that's going to appear a year and a half later?
If you're lucky.
Yeah.
You could get cut.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it is, because it's you're in the moment. It's current. It's happening now. Immediately, and the audience response feeds your performance. Yeah, like we're talking now.
Yeah. You've also done commercials and voiceover work and whatnot. Is all acting the same to you, or or are there specific things for specific media of acting? For example, is there a difference between the way you would approach acting in a commercial selling Folgers coffee versus the way you would a 2-minute role on a sitcom versus the way you would if you are a secondary or tertiary character in a film? Or is it all basically the same in terms of your internal preparation?
I think in terms of, as you say, internal preparation, you are always looking for the truth of the moment and the truth of the character. And that's true no matter what medium. But the techniques you employ are very different. I mean, that's in some ways, that's why in commercials, the way you look is far more important, I think, than even your ability, because you only have 30 seconds. They have 30 seconds to get their point across. You've got to look the way they need you to look. So all that's immediate for the viewer. They get it immediately. Whereas certainly on stage, or even on film, when you have a longer period of time and you can present who you are and the audience can come to you and know you. So it's different techniques, but basically you're always looking for the truth of the character. So that's foundational to everything, I think. Voiceover, everything.
There are different types of directors, especially in film. There are those that are considered actors, directors that might take you aside and say, well, in this scene, so and so feels A, B, and C, and you need to do this, what not. Other directors might be say, well, you were hired for the role, just do it. Do you gravitate towards one type of acting style or a directing style? Would you prefer to have a director who's hands-on, or one that says, okay, you know the role, do it?
I don't gravitate to any particular type. I'm sort of looking forward to the challenge of whatever's presented. And certainly there's a greater variety, even than what you've just said, in directors. If I were to choose, I would want an actor's director, because it's all collaborative anyway. I can't see what he sees or she sees. I can't see the vision. I don't see the vision for the whole thing the way the director sees it. So I want to hear about that. I want his opinion or her opinion. That's why I prefer that kind of director.
When you've done stage roles, you're doing something for the 50th, 100th, 120th, 300th time, perhaps, and you have to move around that couch and you have to engage a character, looking them in the eye. Obviously there are going to be some times when you're not as good as you were the night before, or the person that you're working with was not as good as the night before. Is there a way that you sort of steel yourself? Because I would think after a number of times, the lines down pat. It's just about the little subtleties on stage. How do you make it fresh each night?
Well, you're right. It is the little subtleties on stage, and if another actor is having a bad day, or they're sick, or they've just gotten a terrible bit of news right before they've come on, all of that plays into the truth of the scenes. I welcome all of that, and of course the audience is different every night, and that's a major component to how the play runs. The audience, it's not even if it's a comedy, you feel the energy, and I never had any problem doing a play, the 80th performance. It never. It's so, and all of it's valid. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter if the play is if the performance is exactly the same night after night after night, because none of us are. We're all changed every day in some way. So it makes sense that the play morphs, the performance morphs.
Yeah.
If you're engaged in life.
Yeah. I know that a few film directors have ideas about, a successful film has 4 or 5 big scenes, and then there are sort of bridging scenes in between. If you can get those 4 or 5 big scenes, you'll have a good movie. I've often found that, for example, if you see Oscar reels or Emmy reels that are submitted, and I've known a few people who were on the voting academies, there are often these scenes where someone's in a hospital, or someone's caught someone committing adultery, or these melodramatic scenes. But I often think that the best acting is done in those little bridging scenes between the big scenes, where you have a character maybe just going to a bar, exasperating to someone, and that's where you can tell when someone's a good actor. pretty much any competent actor can cry. Pretty much any competent actor can, wring their hands if their mother is supposedly dying at their deathbed. But it's those little scenes that seem to be ignored. That really measures the worth of an actor. Do you agree about that? And when you've done roles like that, because mostly you've played secondary characters in films, uh, are those the scenes that you really like the most?
It's a wonderful question. And by the way, I'm an Oscar voter, so I get all those.
Oh yeah, you get all the
And
DVD discs. Yeah.
and the Emmy voter, and you're
Yeah.
right. And those videos are sent to us because they do require a certain um, skill of the actor. It's but emotionally for the audience, it's the bridging scenes that are
Yeah.
more engaging because it helps them along. It makes them understand where we're going. It helps them consider where we're going. So that's why it's I think more interesting. Sorry, my
Yeah.
phone. Okay.
Well, you mentioned then about being in the academy. So I assume you're a SAG-AFTRA actor. Let me just ask you, because I've spoken with a few other actors who told me that when they were young, it sometimes took them 5 or 10 years before they could qualify to join the union. Were you someone who got into SAG right away? Because some of the people who it took some time said that it was a good learning experience for them to do non-union films or TV shows up in Canada, although I guess that's Canadian union. But doing those little roles helped prepare them for when they did a role that was able to get them in the union. Did you join the union right away? And what was the difference between working between the non-union stuff and the union?
Well, I've never done non-union work.
Okay.
So yes, I got in immediately, and it's kind of a fascinating story how I got in.
Go ahead.
I was not interested in being an actor when I was in graduate school, although I was taking a Master of Fine Arts in Acting. I chose that as opposed to a Master's of Theater simply because it would be more fun to do the acting. I liked the coursework better. But I was intending to be a teacher. I wanted to go to my Catholic high school, all girls, and help those girls learn to get up and actually say something and not be intimidated. Also, I thought acting was just so impractical, which, of course, it is. But I went to grad school. I was in a play, cast in a play, A Streetcar Named Desire, the part of Eunice, the upstairs neighbor. It was directed by Charles Nolte, who had had an illustrious career on Broadway as a young leading man and a juvenile. And he was friends with Tennessee Williams. Good friends. And so he had Williams come see us at this university production in Minnesota. And the major newspapers clamored for interviews, and he gave them. And in it, he said that the 3 young actresses, and then he named us, were the future of the American theater. And so regional theater directors came and saw the production, and all 3 of us were offered contracts. I, being practical, told Terrence Kilburn of Meadowbrook Theater that I was interested, but since I was only in the first year of a 2.5-year program, could he ask me the next year? And he said he would. So in that year, I completely changed my focus. I learned about unions, insurance. I learned about Lord A and B, resident theaters. I learned everything, and I accelerated my program so I could finish. He did come back. He offered me 7 out of 8 shows, whereas the year before it was 6 out of 8. And I went, following that year of school. I still had 6 credits to go, but I took an independent study so I could finish while I was in Michigan. And the first play I did was Member of the Wedding, and I got my union card. And there's even a better, well, no, it's not better, but it's also good. In that same play, Member of the Wedding, they had local actors too, equity actors, from the Detroit area. And one of them worked in the office of Screen Actors Guild. And he came one day to rehearsal and said, "Oh, listen, you guys, anybody want to join SAG? We're having a sale for membership, and we need to, bulk up our membership here. So if you're not staying in Detroit, it's okay. You can just transfer to wherever you're going to go." All I could think was, now that's a bargain. So I paid $50 to get into SAG. I didn't use my SAG card for probably 3 years, about 3 years, 4 years. But I knew that it was down the road if I was going to do TV or daytime.
Yeah.
And that proved well. I'm always into a good bargain.
Well, it's interesting when I do these interviews because each actor brings up interesting points, some political points, some about acting theory, others about all sorts of things. You're one of the first, and maybe the first that's brought up acting school. So let me ask you a little bit about that, because I know a lot of young actors, are probably, thinking about going to acting school. And I know a few months ago, I think it was famous actress, the British actress who's 70, and she's like always on all the most beautiful list. Name slips my mind, but she was talking about how to. Mirren, right? And she was talking about how a lot of the younger actors today, they don't go to acting school, and they just have they're hired because of their looks or their popularity on Facebook. Talk to me about the value of acting school for you specifically, because I know that as a writer myself, I think that one of the bad things that MFA creative writing programs have done is they've tried to Henry Fordize writing, and they're trying to make, like, any young woman who wants to go there, you can be Emily Dickinson too, and it just doesn't work like that. Is it a similar thing in acting school, or is there actual worth there that a young person can learn?
I think there's an incredible amount to learn, and I encourage everybody. I mentor a number of students, and even when they finish a master's program, my thing is, if you're coming out here, you need to get into some television acting programs. So improv is enormously important, and a lot of programs don't provide that. But I think the purpose of an education, whether it's in acting or writing, is to develop yourself as an all-round person of the world, of your country, and all that makes for a better actor. It's foundational to who we are as people, and of course, as we are to actors. I do think it's a shame that so many young people now are being, the industry is so different from when I first came. It's just so different, and they are taking kids who offer sort of one note, and they exploit the one note. And when it's done, will those people be able to go on and have a career? Some will, but a lot won't. And that's those people who sort of come to the industry in that way. They're not going to be able to do theater unless they go study. The skill set is so different. But if you come with a skill set of theater, you can easily adapt to the other skill sets you need to do film or TV or commercials or voiceover.
Well, tell me about one or two things that you learned in film school from one of the teachers that you didn't know, and then maybe give me an example where you applied it, say, in a role later on, whether it's television, stage, or film.
One of my favorite classes was Shakespeare. And we had a wonderful teacher, Professor Wes Bulk. And one of the things he had us do was improv, but only using Shakespearean text. So you had to, number one, learn a lot of Shakespearean text, and you had to be able to adapt it to an improv scene that wasn't Shakespeare. It wasn't the play. And so it was a brilliant concept and difficult to do, and required us to listen intently, to learn a great deal of Shakespeare, to consider its meaning in a contemporary fashion, and to do it right now. And that skill set probably pops up in most jobs, certainly in comedy or on a set where they're changing the script all the time, right on the set, and they flip you a new scene and give you a couple minutes to sort of gauge it. You learn spontaneity, you learn some sincere concentration. You learn to listen, which feeds your performance and your reaction. Is that a good example?
Yeah, sure. Let me ask.
Unusual.
Yeah, let me ask about when you get a script or a role offered to you. What is it that would draw you to a role, obviously, other than a paycheck? And have you turned down any roles, and have they been for philosophic reasons, or some people don't want to do nudity, others might not want to play a Nazi or something. Have you ever had to turn down a role or a character, or maybe it just wasn't? It was a terrible role that you didn't want.
I have turned down. I have not turned down roles, but I have turned down auditions, and not many. Maybe in all these years, this is my 43rd year. Less than 5, surely less than 5, might be less than 3. I can remember a couple of them. One was a few years ago, and I found the script just distasteful. I thought I don't need to be on that set.
Was it something that, like, the character was a serial killer or something?
No. Vulgar, sophomoric. A lot of sex jokes, but high school. And interestingly, my girlfriend, very good friend, did go in and get the part, and it has led her to get other parts with the same production company. And she was able to modify some of the stuff that she had to do. And I think, well, then she was the right person for it, and I wasn't. I knew I wasn't. Then I one time was going to audition for a part where it was a devil worshiper, and I am a devout Christian. And so before I took the audition, I read the script a couple of times. I sent it to my sister, who has a master's in theology, and we discussed whether this was something that would support my faith and not the opposite. And we decided, yes, go ahead. And I did get the part, and I did it, and it was all fine. I also was offered, and I turned down, and it was a non-union job. I turned it, it was the first thing that happened to me when I came to LA. It was a non-union job, and I was union. It was to do a voiceover, do the sexual love-making sounds for a porn film. I would not have my name attached to it, and I would make great money. I turned it down. It was an obvious,
Well, let me take what you just said and talk about art and the personal. I do know, and I have your Wikipedia page up, and I'll link your website, that page, and the IMDb page underneath here. And you have a link to Christ the King Church in Los Angeles. I was just wondering, are you like a deacon there, or?
No, because it's a Catholic church, and we do have deacons, but it's a very different kind of program from simply a lay person. So no, but I'm incredibly involved. Okay. Today I was a Eucharistic minister. I sing in the choir. I sit on a trust. I'm a board member of a charitable trust that's held at the church. I've been head of the pastoral council. I've been liturgical coordinator and taught all the courses for ministry. In fact, they've asked me to teach it one more time, the lector course. So I'm, a lot of years. Yeah. I love it. It's the center of my week.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask is just yesterday I was watching an Andrei Tarkovsky film called Andrei Rublev, which is a very religious film. I don't know if you've ever seen any of
Yeah.
Tarkovsky's work, but he's well known for his spirituality in films. Do you take your acting as something more than just pretending that you're someone else? Is there then, because you're religious, is there sort of an ecumenical or religious fervor that you bring to it, i.e., that it somehow serves a higher purpose?
Well, I do think it does for me because I know that I'm called to do this. This is what God wants for me.
Mhm.
This is the talent He gave me, and I'm obliged to use it to honor Him and His gift to me.
Mhm.
And so I do think it that way.
Yeah. Now
I try to think of all my life that way.
Yeah.
To try to be kind to people,
Yeah.
but certainly my acting, absolutely.
The reason I ask is I interviewed a fellow a few months ago named Basil Hoffman, and he had been agnostic or atheist, and he had an incident in his life where he, I guess you, what did he call himself? I guess he wasn't a born again. I guess he's a Jew for Jesus. He
Yeah.
calls him. And was there any then turning point? And he said that he was already an established actor, and it involved the death of his wife or something like that. I forget the details.
Yeah.
Was there some real personal moment that you had? And was this before you became an actor or after?
Well, I'm a cradle Catholic
Mhm.
and grew up in a very Catholic home where both my parents practiced Catholicism, and we all saw how it worked.
Mhm.
It worked for them. There was no dichotomy in it. They preached it and they lived it. But when I was 19, I was in school, but I also had a job. And I think it's in fact, I know it's very common when you're in college that as you are finding your own voice and your own independence, you often turn away from or certainly question your sort of what you've been brought up with. And I did. So I would not call it a crisis of faith, but I remember my dad asking me, was I going to Mass? Tomorrow, Sunday. And I said, I don't really need Mass, I can be with God anywhere. And he said, well, you owe it to yourself to constantly reevaluate that position. Well, that sentence, that thought stayed with me and rang with me. And I would say 10 months later, because I was constantly reevaluating, I came back stronger than ever and committed more fervently to my faith. That was it was hardly a crisis, but it was a moving away. It was a recommitting, and that for me was profound.
Well, let me ask you about sacrifices that go along with the actor's life, because most people think that, well, someone's an actor, they must, I mean, certainly people who make $10, $20 million a film, you have had at least, you could say, a flourishing career. You have over 200 IMDb credits to your name. Have there been sacrifices where, let's say, you had to do a movie and you couldn't do something with your family, or maybe you put off having children or something because of something, an earlier job that came along or something? What are the sacrifices that you've made for your art?
I know there are sacrifices for many actors. I just didn't think of them that way. I wanted, well, let me put it this way. It didn't occur to me until I was 35 and a half that I wanted to get married. I was focused on putting my energy into this career, and it did take a lot of everything I chose to do supported my doing my career. So the straight job that I had to be totally flexible and work around auditions, jobs, travel, etc. And I always thought, if I'm supposed to get married, I'll meet the guy and that'll be it. But at 35 and a half, I thought, I'm so tired of dating. Let's get this done with. So I refocused my prayer life and made that my number one priority, find the man. And I did. And I asked 20 friends and all my family to make it their number one prayer priority. They never even heard me talk about marriage. I was like, whoa, I guess she's serious. And then I 39. Uh, it wasn't a sacrifice because it hadn't occurred to me. I didn't want it till I wanted it. Regarding, you mentioned travel. I have a deep passion for travel. I'm always planning travel. I've always just come off a trip. I'm always about to go on a trip. And that was either when I was younger and had absolutely no money to when I'm now, getting Social Security and pensions and can kind of do what I want. When I was younger and building my career, I would try desperately to figure out the best time to travel when I had the least conflict, the slowest audition season, not during pilot season. And at that time in the 80s and 90s, even into the mid 80s and 90s, there was a much more structured industry. There was specific times for seasons. Not so much anymore. You can pretty well be called to do a pilot, audition for a pilot at any time, shoot it at any time. So in those early years, I did travel, but not nearly as long as I wanted to, or as often as I wanted to. And it wasn't because I didn't have the money or I couldn't figure out a way to do it cheaply. It was because I wanted to be available for my career. And I'm glad I did it. I don't think of that as a sacrifice because I did still get to travel. And now though, 43 years, I still want to work, but I'm not hungry for it. If it comes, it comes. And it always comes. I always get work. So, my husband and I just spent 62 days in Europe. I'm now planning a month in South Africa. So, I suppose, Dan, in some way, maybe somehow I did make sacrifices at the time, but I certainly don't remember them that way. And I am an optimistic person by nature. I don't think of things in those terms too much. It's all of life the trade-off.
Okay. Well, let me ask, in the next segment, I want to talk about some of your roles and things that you've appeared in. But let me end this first segment asking you then how you define success as an actor. Is it because, let's say, you have the ability now to travel? Do you consider that part of the success? Do you consider it more, though, oh, I really nailed that role, even if it's just a 10-second thing where you get the biggest laugh in a sitcom?
I know exactly how I define success. It's the 3 goals I set for myself right out of grad school before I went to Michigan to do theater. I wanted longevity, variety, and constancy. I've had that. That to me is success for me. I did when I when I was starting out in LA, I thought if I made $100,000 a year, that's successful. I did that many, 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 many years. So the 100K is, I have a deep respect and appreciation for money and finances. I like that field. It's my German side. I do my investments. I know my husband's so grateful he doesn't have to do any of it and doesn't want to. So, in sort of, obviously that has nothing to do with artistic, success, but it's another measure of success for me at that time. But the 3, mainly the variety, constancy, and what was the other one? Constancy, variety, and longevity. Yeah. That's it. And it's the same as when I was 23 as I am now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've often told young writers that the 3 things that define someone to be great at something is to have the quality of greatness, to reach it, to have quantity, to show that it's not just a fluke, and then diversity, that you're doing things, you're just not repeating yourself as an artist to be able to do that. But well, let's end this segment. In the next segment, we'll look through some of the roles that are listed on IMDb, and we'll do that when we return. I'm speaking with actress Marianne Muellerleile, and we've talked a little bit about acting in a more theoretical and personal vein. And since you have such a broad listing of roles. I'm going to just sort of skip around to some of the more interesting ones as I come across them. Let me just ask, what was your first role? You said you started out in SAG. It's listed here as Magnum PI, but then the same year there's The Greatest American Hero. Which one of them came first?
Good story.
Yeah.
Magnum PI. I had been in LA about 2 weeks. I was doing general, they were called go-tos. They don't do those anymore. It's just a general meet with a casting person. And I was asked to go to Universal, never been to a studio. Was asked to do a Russian accent, never done a Russian accent. I called the only other actor I knew in LA, Joel Brooks. And I asked, do you know a Russian accent? He said, I don't know a Russian accent. I said, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? They won't give me the script. When you get a play, you read the script 2 or 3 times and figure out how your portion plays into the theme and the tone and everything. Well, TV's not about that. I said, Joel, they want me just to show up, and then they're going to give me the material, and then I'm supposed to somehow know it well enough to go in and do it. He said, look, go 15 minutes early, get the script, call me. I'll be at this restaurant. Here's the number. I'll help you. You'll write down phonetically everything I say, and I will do some work now and try to get my Russian. I said, okay. I did that. I wrote everything down. I went in. It was Don Belisario, the great, producer. And, I remember it so vividly. And number one, I said I had never been in a studio, and it was Universal. And Universal is one of the great studios. I mean, it's just so magnificent. Anyway, I went in. He sat behind a huge desk with a huge bookcase behind him. He looked so impressive. And I did my reading. And afterwards, he said, well, that was everything from Inger Stevens to Desi Arnaz. And I said, yes, but I was consistent. And I left. So I then went the next day. That was probably a Tuesday or a Wednesday. I went the next day down to my brother's house in Anaheim, picked up his key to his house in Mexico. I had nothing going on. I was just going to go down to Mexico for a few days. Then I said, I better call my machine. My agent said I'm supposed to call like every 2 hours to see if somebody, because in New York you had a service. They called you. Yeah. They tracked you on your beeper and everything. I'm trying to learn the new method out here. I had to have a machine. So I called and they said they want to bring you back tomorrow. Friday. They're going to send you to a dialect coach for the Russian tomorrow, and then you're going out. So, oh my gosh, I came back. I went then to an actor by the name of Alan Rich, an extraordinary actor. And I went up to his home in Hollywood Hills. I mean, oh my gosh, it was all white. I'll never forget that. He had a sunken living room. He had a dining room that had a wraparound iron balcony that led to the bedroom. I mean, I was just like, whoa, this is Hollywood. As I came in with my little cassette recorder, going to go into his living room, he said, meet my wife, Elaine. She was a manager. Behind Elaine was this gorgeous girl with jet black hair down to the back of her waist, magnificent looking girl. And she said, hi, my name is Fran Drescher. Oh my God, that's a Hollywood starlet. The voice, I mean, just, and the look, so incongruous. Yeah. I went in, I told Alan, thank you so much, just read my lines and put it on my cassette. He did that. I was gone in 15 minutes. Went home, over and over, loop, 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 got it, totally memorized. I couldn't think. I mean, I couldn't sleep that night. Because while I was at my brother's, and I said I had this call back from Magnum PI, my niece said, oh my gosh, that shoots in Hawaii. I said, no. No, that's a big, big, big show. Well, I didn't know any of it because I'd done theater for 6 years. You're only off on Monday. I never watched any TV. All I did was my laundry, maybe do roller skating or something, maybe a dinner with pals. So I thought, well, but it's not that big a part. They're not going to send me to... I went in. I did it. flawlessly. I just did what was on the recording with my interpretation. And Monday they flew me to Hawaii for 9 days. I walked into they flew me first class. Back then, that was part of our contracts. I'd never flown first class. I sat next to a girl who was also in the show, the episode, and she said, "Oh, I'm the guest star." "Oh," I said, "I'm the co-star." Now, to me, I thought co meant the same as the star. But, of course, I know that the guest star is the big part. Yeah. Now, I thought, oh, well, I guess I've got a good part here. Then we went into the limousine, picked us up. They took us to the Colony Surf Hotel. I was put into a room that was so over the top. I thought they'd made a mistake. Clearly, this can't be for me. Huge basket of fruit, huge basket of flowers, two king size beds, the bathroom alone I could have slept in, a kitchen fully stocked, a closet with fins and umbrellas and snorkel and you thought my clothes were there, but they weren't. Anyway, I had 9 glorious days there. I only shot 2.5. They gave me a limousine for the other 6.5 days. I toured all of Oahu, and I made $1,900, and it's still paying me today. I mean, it was the most incredible experience. Then I come back. The next audition I go on is The Greatest American Hero. I booked it. I had gone on a general interview with Reuben Cannon, the casting person for that show. And when I left that general interview, he said, "I'm going to hire you before I can't afford you." I thought, isn't that a cute thing to say? The man did it. I got my next job on my second audition. And that was, talk about night and day. I was in the desert, shot in the desert. I wish I could remember the name. It's a little town outside of LA. It was a completely different environment. On that particular show, at that particular episode, the actors who were in the leads were not, my opinion, very professional because they had not learned their lines. And we did it over and over and over and over and over and over until they learned their lines. And it was a huge eye-opener. I mean, I can't fathom going to a set without knowing everything cold. Those were my first 2 jobs and first 2 auditions. Then I settled into being just like every other actor, going on a lot of auditions and hitting a few of them.
Yeah. Well, you have a lot of stories, but since we don't have all the time that I'd like,
Okay.
I want to hit some of the highlights. And obviously, you did a lot of classic 80s shows. You had a lot of Norman Lear shows you guested on, The Jeffersons, One Day at a Time, Archie Bunker's Place. But probably when I Google your name, or anyone were to Google your name, a small role in the film The Terminator seems to be the thing that you're most known for. And it's basically just being killed by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you had one line. And yet that's probably the one role that you're most associated with. Just if you could, certainly I saw an interview where you said you didn't know it was going to be that big and it was just another job for you, but you said you had met and hung out with Schwarzenegger for a while. Do you ever get called to these sci-fi conventions or whatnot because you were in that? Have you ever done one of those kind of conventions? Or?
I have not, and I have inquired about it, but I have not. I do get a lot of. I think the reason I'm most known for that is because the movie is iconic and it is appealing to all generations. So you can have a 12-year-old boy who knows about the Terminator, and a 74-year-old man knows, and that's why it's why I'm recognized for it. It's it's become a huge. It is a huge movie, and so there's been plenty of stuff about James Cameron being a meticulous and focused kind of director. Let me tell you, I only had one word. I said yes, and then I had reactions, and that I auditioned 4 times for it in a little room with a conference table there, and I had about 3 feet behind me. I remember thinking, well, how am I going to back away from this imaginary gun? I mean, there's nothing. Anyway, that's how meticulous the man was. You know, that my silent scream. First, he had me vocalize my scream. Then, on another audition, he had me silent scream. And then the second time we did it both times, maybe 3 auditions. Anyway, it was a very memorable shoot. It was a half a day. Arnold and I, this is before he became famous. He was only famous in the bodybuilding world. He was very warm to me. He asked me to have lunch with him, and I did. And we actually had quite a bit in common. He's a Catholic, you know, he's very good with his finances. You know, I was taking an investment course at the time, and he asked me about that. And so we started talking about the market and everything. Anyway, it's great.
Well, let me, for the rest of the 80s, you have a very sort of complete record. I do want to ask about one show, because another guest that I had interviewed was also did an episode of the show that only lasted a year or two, called Sledgehammer. And I remember the fellow who was on it said that it was a really great experience working there. Do you have any memories of that show? Because that was one of these over-the-top shows, and the guy David Rash, he was sort of like the Leslie Nielsen character in Airplane. And
yeah, a great guy.
Yeah.
And I had a great part because, in fact, I used a clip of it on my demo reel for that period, those 3 or 4 years for that reel. The reason it was such a fun part is I was a madam, or not a, you know, a madam of women, I like a cocktail manager, you know, I mean, a manager in a cocktail lounge or something. Huge hair, huge flamboyant outfit. And I don't remember what our exchange was. Maybe it was about some woman. But anyway, I gave him a right hook. And it was just hilarious. The whole idea of me throwing a punch at some guy. It was a lot of fun, and got a lot of play. And it was a very lighthearted set.
Yeah.
I remember I loved my costume. I taught costuming in grad school, so I have deep feelings about what I wear.
Yeah.
So, excuse me.
Yeah. Now, one other show that I want to, from that era, that I want to ask you about was one that was well known for having reused people in different parts, and that was Night Court.
I knew you were going to say it.
Yeah. It looks like you played 4 separate characters in 4 different episodes. I know, and again, you don't have to name names, but I know some of the other people that I've interviewed who've had a handful of them did that show, were very back and forth. And I know the very first woman I interviewed, Karen Austin, had been on the first season of Night Court. And so was that a good set to work on? Because I know one fellow who said he worked on Barney Miller in Night Court. He didn't get into his business, but he said that he preferred the Barney Miller atmosphere rather than Night Court atmosphere. What are your memories of working on Night Court in any of the episodes?
Across the board is fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. And a lot of that had to do with how strongly it was written.
Yeah.
You know, those characters were rich.
Yeah.
And funny.
Laura Kett won 4 Emmys in a row, I think. John Laura Kett.
All the actors were talented. You know, I never did a Barney Miller. Perhaps maybe some of the actors preferred that set, in that on Night Court, the regulars pretty well kept to themselves, which is absolutely no problem for me. I'm happy to use my time off set doing any myriad of my projects, you know. But I know some actors would prefer to be engaged with the other actors. But I had such a good time. In fact, I remember one particularly, might have been the last one I did. She was a lawyer for dogs. Mm-hmm. And I remembered I wanted the job so much. I was trying to think, what could I do that would just take it over the top, where they'd say, oh my gosh, we have to book this girl. And I came up with it. During my scene in the court, I did a little laugh, but I laughed like this. And I was defending a little tiny dog. So I think that got me the
I think I remember seeing that episode a few months ago. You have so many roles that I'd love to talk to you about, but since we don't have all the time, I want to talk about in the early '90s. You're most known probably in the soap world for having been on Passions, and we'll get to that in a moment. But it looks like you were on Santa Barbara first, and only a handful of episodes.
Right.
Was that your first soap opera experience, and how was that different from primetime television?
It was not my first. My very first was in New York, where I used my SAG card for the first time, and it was a soap opera, and I'd have to look to see if it's there somewhere. It's like I know everything is on my personal website.
Yeah.
I have, IMDb has about 200 and something. I've done probably 500 shows.
Okay.
But how are they different? Very, very, very different. One of the things I am grateful for having done Passions for 8 seasons is that now I wasn't a lead. I came in.
Yeah.
I recurred. So you can only imagine that the leads had so much more burden. But I would have 40 to 50 pages to learn per day.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, you have to exercise your brain because those lines they're just slightly different from the next line because you're prolonging the story over many days. So you're on the same story point maybe for 2 days and you're just nudging them. It took a great deal of discipline. Also, you sometimes shoot out of sequence, and if your scene is required to be at a certain emotional pitch, you have to be there before you are sort of physically or organically there. So I used to go through the script and mark on a 1 to 10 scale, or no, 1 to 5 scale, where I am emotionally. So anytime a scene was pulled, I knew where I had to be emotionally. I didn't have to think; it was just technical. Another thing about the difference is that there's virtually no rehearsal. You have to know the lines. You're called to come to the blocking. The directors block differently. Sometimes they have you say the lines as you're going through where they want you to stand. Many times you're not. You say, on this line I want you there. You make a note. This line you want there. You move, okay. And then you go back, finish your makeup, go and shoot it. And we didn't shoot more than twice on any, and most of the times we shot each scene once. It is rapid fire. You've got to come with everything.
Well, let's talk about Passion just for a moment here, because that wasn't a standard soap opera. It probably harkened back to something like Dark Shadows in the late '60s and '70s, because it was sort of weird. I know my wife watched. My wife knew you from both The Terminator and from Passions, and it had sort of the famous or infamous doll boy on it, and it was sort of wacky, over the top, and whatnot. But it has still, I guess, a cult following. Is that, other than the Terminator, is that the role that most people will associate you with?
Yes, I do. Just the other day, a young man outside of a Rite Aid stopped me and said, "Oh my gosh, you're Norma. You were on Passions, right?" So we had to talk about it, and he wanted to know what happened to the characters, and I know he meant actors, but he said the character names. That was an extraordinary thing how that happened. I never auditioned for the part. I'd never seen the show. I got a call. I had done a Will and Grace, playing a very butch dyke lesbian. Very funny episode. Runs a lot.
Yeah.
And it was the same network. And when this casting person got the breakdown, they wanted somebody who was sexually amorphous and or ambiguous, I should say. So she had just seen me the night before on that show, and she told the producer, and he said, "Well, send me a clip," and they did, and he said, "Okay, hire her." And it was for 4 days, and I did it, and I don't know if you ever saw it, but I had a skull, my father's skull, that I carried in a baby carrier, and I talked back and forth. And thank God, I asked my agent to call the day before I was to start. I said, "Please call and ask them, how are they going to do the voice? You know, it's going to be a voiceover that I hear. Anyway, when he got back to me, he said, "Oh, no, you're doing both voices." I mean, so I did Daddy's voice and I did Norma's voice for 8 years, back and forth to myself. It was an extraordinary role, an extraordinary discipline, an extraordinary effort.
Well, the character, because of the name Norma Bates, that obviously was a play off of Psycho. Was she supposedly Norman Bates' sister? Was she crazy, and that's what she thought? What was the character's origin?
Well, the show used to do many takeoffs on great movie and Broadway shows and stuff. So this was just that. We recreated. They had the old house. They had the Psycho scene with me killing her in a shower, and that was it. But the producer liked, James Riley was his name, he liked it so much that he decided to have my character continue to be obsessed with Tabitha and Timmy, the little doll.
Yeah.
And so for 9 years, I was trying to kill them. Just, they'd put me inside the house. Sometimes they'd use other scenes, and have the rocking chair, my father, his skeleton in a rocking chair, madness, incredible. There were so many scenes that were so unique. They had me swimming in the sewers of New York City. I thought, how are they going to do it? They built the sewers. They put live rats and fake rats all around. They put coffee grounds in the sewer. They warmed the water, and for 3 days I swam around in it trying to find. I mean, there were endless, crazy things, explosions, traps.
So Norma was sort of the Wile E. Coyote to the Roadrunner of the Doll Boy.
I guess, I mean, they really went nuts on it. They had me fall in love. I ended up doing the first I came out as a lesbian. They had me doing the first lesbian kiss in daytime. We had a marriage. We toured the gay bars of Europe, sing as a duo, singing. I was in an insane asylum twice, dressed as a sweet baby, Betty Davis and Baby Jane, with the blonde, and off the charts.
Well,
probably the greatest run I've ever had.
Well, let me just harken back to the first segment where you spoke about being religious. And I know I've talked to some other actors, and one fellow who was an artistic director at the theater said that sometimes he would have Christian actors who refused to do something that were against their principles. So I would take it you're not a fundamentalist Christian, that if you were playing a lesbian part there, that wasn't against your religion or anything?
No, it's not against, my personal faith. No, not at all.
Okay.
Of course not.
All right, I'm just asking because I know some people have stated that. Well, let me talk about some of the other stuff here. You'd mentioned Fran Drescher, and I see you did an episode of The Nanny. Were you friends with Fran Drescher? Did she know you when you were?
Well, I've actually done 3 things with her. One was something about Calm. It was a little movie. I don't remember the name. She did a feature called The Beautician and the Beast. I was in that, and I did The Nanny. Yes, I think she does know me, but not well. I've never been to her home or anything. Lovely girl, woman. I enjoyed my time with her on set and off set.
There were a couple of other sort of over-the-top sitcoms that you appeared in, out of many. Married with Children and Third Rock. Do you have any stories from either of those shows?
The Married with Children, I was a house inspector. It was pretty straightforward. The character was a doer, and I have no specific memories other than it was, a great day in and out. But Third Rock, yes, I do. I was hired for one one episode, and John just really loved what I did, and it was a character who wasn't going to let his character get away with anything. So it was like a brick wall to his character. And he apparently told the producers, I've got to have her. she's got to come back. So I ended up doing 6 of them, and they, promoted my character out of she was a cashier in a cafeteria, and then they got me in. They made me assistant to Jane Curtin, which meant I could be in the office where he was, and we had some wonderful times. A lot of laughter. He just loved he loved his character being put in a squeeze. Yeah. And that's what my character did all the time. I defied him constantly.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk about a film that you did, and it's probably, lost amongst all your things, but I remember my wife and I, when we were dating before we got married, we went and saw it, and that was in 2000, the film you did with David Duchovny, Minnie Drive, and Carol O'Connor called Return to Me. And I think it's it was quite a well-written, and I thought, it's better than the average rom-com.
Absolutely.
But you played, I guess, I think in Carol O'Connor owned the bar or something. You were one of his waitresses or serving girls. Is there anything that you remember about that film? Because it seemed to me one of those kind of films that just get lost in current Hollywood days, because it didn't have it wasn't filled with violence and sex. It was just kind of well cast, had well written, and it's just a nice little movie to go out and see on a Saturday night.
Absolutely, you perfectly described it. It's the total genius of Bonnie Hunt, who wrote and directed and starred in it. It was certainly the happiest time I ever had on a film. I think it shot 6 weeks. I was 3.5 weeks in Chicago. I knew Bonnie very well, having worked with her in a series, her first series. We bonded very quickly there. She told me later, I don't know where I'm going, but where I'm going, I'm taking you. I thought, isn't she the sweetest kid in Hollywood? Well, she did it. People in Hollywood don't normally do that, but she cast me in that film. She later cast me in a series, which ran for 2 years. So I remember my time with Carol O'Connor vividly. I did not remind him of my time working with him on Archie Bunker's Place, because that particular episode was a little tricky with me and Carol. Should I go into that, or do you have time?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
It was also about a 20-year difference, so his not remembering is expected, I would think.
Of course.
Yeah.
But my point was, I didn't remind him.
Yeah.
There was no point. But anyway, I did that Archie Bunker's Place. My character was the girlfriend, the new girlfriend of, was his name Barney? I think it was Barney.
Yeah.
The character Barney.
Melvin, Alan Melvin?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. I was supposed to recur. And I came to the set, and there was a little sequence where I sing a song, a little bar or two.
Yeah.
And we had, I think his name was Alan Rutger. It was a director. But clearly, it was Carol O'Connor who was directing. And I was very confused by that. I didn't understand it. He was the one coming up and telling me things.
Yeah.
And Alan wasn't doing anything. Oh, I hope I got that name right. Oh, I mean, I'm sure he was, but not with me. It was Carol. And Carol kept telling me that I wasn't on pitch. And so we'd do it again. I'd do it again. He'd say, no, do it again. Finally, I thought, now this is getting out of hand. And I said, well, excuse me, tell me, is it critical that this character have perfect pitch? He said, no. That was the end of it. Which, by the way, I can sing, but I have since learned, I've met Carol a few other times, he does have perfect pitch.
Yeah.
So that would bother him.
Uh-huh.
But at the time, I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to have to nip this in the bud. Something's happening here. I don't want to get thrown off my game by feeling this pressure. And fortunately, he agreed. The girl who works a toll booth on the Brooklyn Bridge does not have to have perfect pitch.
Let me ask about a more recent show that you did a few years back. You did a voice character for American Dad, which is one of the Fox cartoons of the last decade or so. Let me ask you about animated acting, because you're only projecting your voice. I know other actors have said that sometimes they'll go and record it, and the the animation is then synced up later with it because they have the tracks and they lay out the tracks and they can move them out. But I know other people have said earlier on, but say 20, 30 years ago, it was just the reverse, is that they would do the drawings first, and then you'd have to sync up there. Have
Yeah.
you done both types where you've had to sync your voice, and I would assume it's easier to do the reading and then have them draw around you?
It is, of course,
Yeah.
easier to do the reading. And yes, I have had to do both. And even with when you're doing looping and when you're doing just what's the ADR work, where you've done a movie and there was a sound problem, or they've decided to add dialogue, you have to go in and see yourself and sync to your mouth, or they've changed a word or whatever. Yes, I've had to do both, and of course it is for all the reasons you think. You have total complete freedom when you are recording first and they draw around you and use your voice as inspiration.
Now, I want to, before we wrap up the interview, I want to talk about some of your more recent work here. Just looking on IMDb, in just the last year, you have a handful or more of roles. It looks like mostly television shows, but it looks like the last one that you have is called The Way Station, and it says a short. Is this a college film that you're doing?
No, it is not a college film. In fact, it's done by a director who is has gone to festivals. Shorts now are very prominent. I did 2 shorts last year, and this woman, her name is Shea Butler. I met her shooting Major Crimes. No, I met her on another short. She was script supervisor on another short, but she is the script supervisor on Major Crimes, which I also recently shot. And she is a director as well, and she oftentimes they make these shorts to promote themselves as directors and to sort of showcase, get themselves out, and then they can run them through various festivals and get awards, which adds more cachet to their work. And they pay you, and they're good. It's good work. It's fun, and it's always short. That short script, so a few days.
Well, have you ever done any shorts for college? People who are going through film school.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Is that more professional? Or obviously, since they're younger, they won't have the experience. Have you found that to be a good experience, the ones you've done?
Yes, overall good, but it's a bit trying.
Yeah.
I hired a young man. I hired several young people from USC to do various jobs at our house, bookkeeper or whatever. And mostly they turn out to be in the film school. Although I just, put the ad in the Trojan newspaper. Anyway, this last young man, he's Nepalese, and I think he is very, very gifted. He's a director. And he asked me, he'd written this script called Upside Down. I think it's on IMDb. And he shot it at my house, which was great for him. It was a good experience, but because all the people involved are beginners, and there's, it takes a lot more time. And when you're doing it for free in your own house, in your own costumes, you're doing your makeup, I don't want to do a lot of those, but I'm very happy to help him, and I hope one day to work with him on a union production. I think this kid is going places. His name is Raj. I wish I had his name in front of me. It's a long Nepalese name that Taco Raka or Taco. Anyway, Tuko.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, let's end this segment here. In the next segment, we'll wrap things up, and I want to just ask you about what you have coming up in the future and a few other questions, and we'll do that in a moment. Wrapping up my conversation with Marianne Muellerleile, you would be considered, I guess, what the term is, a character actor or a character actress. I know some actors and actresses sort of cringe at a term like that. Do you sort of embrace that kind of a term?
Absolutely. I love being a character actor.
Would you prefer, but wouldn't you prefer like being the Elizabeth Taylor roles kind of?
Do you really remember those parts more than the characters?
No, that's a good
Listen,
point.
you know why I also wouldn't want to be. I wouldn't want to have to look good all the time. I wouldn't want to have to put on makeup every time I walked out of the door, or I wouldn't want some camera in my face. I would loathe all that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what you have coming from the future, because we looked at a number of your roles on IMDb. Are you shooting anything right now? You talked about pilot season. Are you going out for any pilots recently? What's in the next year or so?
Well, I don't really know. Right now, I have nothing in the can. Everything's aired, and I've been back about 4 weeks from Europe. I've had 3 TV auditions. I didn't book those. I've had 2 commercial calls. I didn't book those. So I'm doing my projects. I always have a lot of projects, and I love doing those. So I don't feel concerned or anything. I'll book whenever I'm supposed to. I have nothing that I know of. You were the thing I was going to do.
Well, let me just ask a final question then. What advice, if you could give any, to someone just getting in the business, and whether it's for stage, film, television, or all of them, do you have any advice on acting in the business in general?
I try to encourage everybody to go to school or be in class. I encourage them to develop their life way beyond their career. I'm very big into volunteering, and I think people should do that. If they're going to get a straight job, they need to get one that supports their career. It can't be a 9 to 5. It has to be totally flexible. Surround yourself with people who are doing better than you are to inspire you.
Well, MarianneMuellerleile.com is your website. I'll link to that, as well as the IMDb and Wikipedia pages below here. Anyone who watches this can get in touch with you, especially if they're in the business, I guess. And so I just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. It's been great getting to know you, and I appreciate your wanting to interview me.